we are live. How's it going, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we got some breaking Mets news to get into, which first dropped over this past half hour, initially broken from Anthony DiComo on the beat there for the Amazons, which stated the following. The Mets are bringing back Ryne Stanek on a one-year deal for this bullpen, everybody. I would love to see your initial reactions in the comments down below. We're going to live react and break down Ryne Stanek, what there is to know about his game, what were the upsides versus downsides in his Mets tenure when the Mets acquired him from the Tampa Bay Rays midway there last season. What can we expect from Ryne Stanek here in 2025? And what is next for this Mets bullpen? Are they done making moves? Are they going to add more, and to what degree? And how does this at all impact the pursuit of Pete Alonso? All that is what we're going to touch on right here, right now. But thank you guys so much for smashing that like and subscribe button as you first chime in. Let me see your initial reactions in the comments down below. And shout out to our amazing sponsor at BetUS, which has you covered with all your sports betting needs, but more on them later in the show, everybody. Thank you so much for spending some of your day, night, evening with Wardy here. This was a perfect way for me to continue to start my day. For those that don't know, my son Shay and I, we have a little bit of a routine sometimes where he goes down for his first nap. Sometimes I'll nap with him, even if it's only for a half hour. And as I woke up, as he woke up too, and he was my alarm, it was perfect timing because I looked at my phone and saw 5 minutes ago or so, Anthony DiComo and then SNY stating that the Mets are bringing back Ryne Stanek. So perfect timing. Thank you, Shay. Really appreciate that. But now let's deep dive Ryne Stanek and what this means for this Mets bullpen, everybody. Let's get a quick roll call here in the live chat to everyone watching live on a replay. And to my replay viewers, please don't hide your thoughts in the comments down below. We want to hear it. We want to know where you guys feel, where you guys stand on the pursuit of bringing back Ryne Stanek now on a one-year deal. We still await word there on the average annual value, but I'd imagine it's not going to be too costly, obviously. On a one-year deal, I'd imagine Stanek is probably in the $4 to $5.5 million range, if I had to guess. Maybe it's a little less, maybe it's a little more. Either way, it's not going to cost the Mets much here, and it certainly leads them to still having flexibility to make moves elsewhere. And as we get into a roll call now, everybody, thank you so much. We got Jimmy in the chat, Frank, Just Kicks, we got Peen, Wolf, James Carroll. I know a lot of you guys are working right now, so I appreciate you guys chiming in during your lunch breaks, or if you guys are just off today for whatever reason or just not working, that's fine too. We're happy to have you in here. We got Joshua Ecker, we got Michael, we got Ethan, we got Ron, we got Kane, we got Leo, we got James, great member, both of you guys. We got Wolf, we got Robert, we got Camp up here, we got Malone, how you doing? We got Wally, how you doing? We got Scott H, longtime follower here. Almighty, Dan Nugent, great member. G-Men31, great member. Michael Page, David, J. Lawn, John, great member, as always, getting the comments started earlier on. Jonathan, Javier, Jordan Simpson, my man with the official WardyNYM Mets jingle. Thomas, how you doing? Thank you guys. Come on, come all. We appreciate you. But let me see the initial reactions, folks. I like this, obviously. Ryne Stanek was someone who I was absolutely in favor of returning to this Mets team, especially knowing how he succeeded with the Mets down the stretch as we ultimately got into postseason play. That was the big standout here with Ryne Stanek. And I'm all aboard having a reliever that might be a little Jekyll and Hyde throughout the year if it means that he's going to step up in crunch time in the most pivotal games for the Mets when they needed to most. Ryne Stanek exemplified that ability and then some over this past 2024 campaign that we're about to get into. Yoshima, thank you so much for the $2 Yoshima says, love the steeper bullpen is always better. Absolutely, everybody. And before we deep dive just Ryne Stanek and all the pros versus the cons and acquiring someone like him and to have him return to this pen, let's now get a good grasp as to where this Mets bullpen stands, everybody. And I want to know how you guys feel about it, because I gotta say, I feel pretty good, especially knowing that the Mets have a lot of guys that'll be competing for bullpen spots on the outside looking in with spring training invites. There's some guys that'll start the year in the minor leagues that I know will have an impact in this Mets bullpen throughout the year that I'm looking forward to seeing how they do in this lab. But as things currently stand, we have Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, Reed Garrett, Daniil Nunez, Jose Budo, and Ryne Stanek as our initial horsemen there in this Mets bullpen. And I'd imagine if you're going to add another right away, one of those starters that does not crack the six-man rotation. So whether that is a Tyler McGill, a Griffin Canning, or a Paul Blackburn, I'd imagine one of those could find themselves there being more utilized as a multi-aim reliever, kind of like a lawn man there if called upon in any kind of circumstance that the Mets would need in said bullpen. That's the other spot that stands out to me. Otherwise, everyone else, for the most part, I think there is that rightful argument that they could be on the outside looking in. I know guys like Sean Reed-Foley obviously are going to be competing for a bullpen spot in spring training. I know that we have Genesis Cabrera, that's a lefty option from the Toronto Blue Jays, that will be competing in spring training. The Mets have a plethora of arms there. Again, when it comes to quality versus quantity, that's what we're going to find out just over the next couple of weeks once pitchers and catchers officially report there to PSL. But in the meantime, I think we could all sit fairly comfortable with now how the bullpen stands, at least on paper, heading into the year, while also saying that, yeah, it wouldn't be bad if the Mets weren't done adding more to the bullpen front, because you can never have enough arms. Not only for the rotation, the bullpen, same exact theory and thought process applies. And before we expand on what could be next for this Mets bullpen still, let's highlight, as you guys see Ryne Stanek's numbers down below, or this past season in 63 games and 55 innings, you look at that, inflated ERA there, a little under 5, but it's the expected numbers I really implore you guys to take a look at. A 3.46 expected ERA tells you that with what Ryne Stanek can truly control around him, not so much the defense around him that could be suspect like it was in the first half of the year with the Mariners at times versus what he got from Lindor among others there in the second half, but it's the reality that what Stanek can control tells you he's a pretty good reliever, right? And Ryne Stanek's sign that we saw with the Seattle Mariners over this past year, because of the main reason of he was coming off of some strong years with the Houston Astros. Himself, Phil Maton, who ultimately went to the Tampa Bay Rays, and then there with the Mets right around midseason. So if I said earlier that we got Stanek from the Rays, I apologize. That's not true. That was Maton. Stanek we acquired from the Seattle Mariners for pretty much nothing, just on a salary dump for the most part, after he was really laboring there in Seattle, surprisingly, where a lot of pitchers go to thrive. Not him there battling it up against the Astros, his former team, and others there in the American League. But we've seen him perform at the playoff level. That's what stood out about Stanek. So after the Mets initially acquired Stanek right around the halfway mark of the season there for pretty much nothing from the Mariners, he definitely labored in his first couple outings that we saw, got a little comfortable, and then we went back into Seattle there for a matchup against the Mariners. Of course, Stanek comes in key situations and he gets absolutely rocked. The worst outing that he had of the entire season was there against his former team that he was just parted with by. But after that, Stanek actually started to get into a groove, and we saw that even with his numbers slightly dipping in the month of September, that we'll highlight shortly, because our fantastic pitching contributor on the platform, Isaac Rothman, has some great breakdown to share on Stanek there with that lively fastball and everything else in between that you're getting with Ryan. But another thing that really stands out to me with him is his ability in the postseason play, right? We saw Ryne Stanek post right around for the Mets a 3.38 ERA there in multiple postseason outings for them in 2024, including 8 strikeouts. So Stanek looked very strong there. And as we look at his K-to-walk ratio this past season, they're splitting time with both the Mariners and the Mets. Let's just see how it really dropped off, or if it did drop off, because the reality is that no, Stanek still had himself a roughly 11 K per 9 to a 4 walks per 9, right? A 4.8 ERA, but that 3.4 expected ERA tells you a lot on what you're getting. Stanek is just a year removed there from having a 4 ERA season with a 4 expected ERA season in his final year in Houston, so you can make the rightful argument that Stanek had himself much greater strides, especially after landing with the Mets, versus the past year and a half of baseball that he's pretty much pitched. The year before that, Stanek had, without question, his best season of his career. That was in 54 innings in 2022 at the Astros, with Hector Neris, with Phil Maton, with so many other relievers who have since parted with Houston over the past couple years. A 10.2 K per 9 to a 5 walks per 9. Even with that inflated walk rate, the home run per 9 was at a measly .33, one of the best in baseball, which led to a career best 1.15 ERA and 3.19 expected ERA. So when we're looking at the numbers here, this was actually one of the best seasons that Ryne Stanek gave us this past year in 2024 across the board, especially since landing with the Mets. So as we head now into 2025 and what his projections currently are, is that this is exactly what you're going to be getting from Stanek in 2025. Again, per Steamer, per a lot of these different projections through Fangraphs, are right around 55 plus innings. He's still expected to get at least a 10 K per 9 to actually a more favorable walks per 9, more in the 3.7, 3.8 range there, to a sub 4 ERA, 3.89 ERA. Who's complaining about that? If we get that from Ryne Stanek, who can be utilized in both low leverage and high leverage situations for the Mets here as we enter 2025, and as a key part of this bullpen, actually working with the lab from the start versus kind of getting those midseason adjustments out of the way that he had to do after the Mets acquired him there from the Mariners. And for those that are are unaware, we do have official word on what the dollar amount is going to be per Andy Martino of SNY. Shout out to my guy Jordan in the live show watching right now for texting me it. It's in the $4 to $5 million range. So your guy Wardy was spot on. I expected it to be in that range again. 4 or 5, top 6 million. So I'm glad it was actually more on the conservative side, like I predicted. And this is right in line with what the Mets gave Adam Ottavino last year. And it's fitting considering Ryne Stanek, it will be our Adam Ottavino this year. Adam Ottavino is not returning to this Mets bullpen. His time in this bullpen is likely done, thankfully. And while I appreciate Adam in 2022, things have soured a bit since then. And there's no need to bring back a veteran that just doesn't have a proper fit with this organization versus Stanek, who throws a lot more gas, has higher upside at this point in his career, and can get a full camp under his belt now at Port St. Lucie in this Mets pitching lab. That is how you get the best out of guys, in my humble opinion. So very much looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with that. And I will say that this certainly can only impact things better for how the Mets go about Alonso and go about their continued pursuit of the bullpen, everybody. But before we talk about Alonso, before we talk about Tim Hill, I do just have to further thank you guys all so much for smashing that like and subscribe on as you first chime in. Let me know your continued reactions in the live chat and to my replay viewers as the Mets are officially bringing back Ryne Stanek on a one-year deal right around $4 to $5 million, according to Andy Martino of SNY. Just to make sure that I'm not missing anything, and he did note there is potential Pete Alonso context to this, which I'll write about shortly, as I fully expected, folks. So pretty much what this means is that the Mets are not going to be signing a guy like David Robertson to a $10+ million deal there on a one-year contract. As much as I would love D-Rob, the Mets are settling with the Ryne Stanek type for this bullpen, so that way they do have more comfortability and more flexibility in what they're going to give Pete Alonso. Clearly, they have a hard line in the sand on wanting to spend so much in certain areas. Now that they can't spend a lot in general, because they surely can, but they don't want to overspend in the bullpen, and they also don't want to overspend on Pete for a guy that they don't want any long-term commitment to, obviously. So we are going to find out shortly the further details on the Alonso front of that, which I'm happy to share. But in the meantime, everybody, as we take a look at Baseball Savant's latest numbers here with our guy Ryne Stanek, let's deep dive the following. And thank you guys again for smashing those buttons as you chimed in here. Zuzu, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate that greatly, my man. Thank you kindly. Okay, guys, look. We have, even though that he was poor in all the percentiles and pitching, fastball, breaking, and off-speed run value, that really didn't reflect a certain amount of his performance here, right? He was in the 73rd percentile in expected ERA, 89th percentile that we saw in expected batting average, 96th percentile, folks, in fastball velocity. Ryne Stanek will consistently pump gas. He was basically averaging 98 miles per hour on his four-seam while touching 100. That is how nasty he is. Average exit velocity he gives up, not so good. He gets barreled hard, which is why he's in the 16th percentile there, giving up at least 90 on the exit velo. He's in the 85th percentile, however, in chase percentage, 94th in whip percentage, and 82nd in K percentage, which I absolutely love. But Ryne Stanek, because he's a flamethrower, because he's a little bit of a wild thing, that leads to the down percentages there in the walk percentages, the barrel percentages, the hard hit and ground ball percentage. He's not a ground ball pitcher. He's a fly ball pitcher for sure, because he gives up hard contact. So you got to hope that you have good outfielders out there in the case of the Mets as we head into 2025. So Soto, we're going to need Siri to cover a lot more range than probably what he otherwise would have needed to if we had someone that was a little bit more defensive proficient there in the corner. We'll get through it. But in all seriousness, Ryne Stanek with that four-seam split, slider, and sinker, the triple S's that we love to say, all pitches that we love to see utilized in this bullpen, headlined by David Stearns really having an act for going out of his way to acquire guys, whether it's with spring training invites or one-year deals like Stanek that has splitties, sinkers, sliders, all those kind of realms, and that's exactly what you're getting here at Ryne Stanek. That's exactly why he has so much bite on his pitches, and that's exactly why I firmly believe that he's going to have a solid season with the Mets there, as not needing to be the guy by any stretch, but a guy that can be utilized in setup situations. If you had to utilize him in a closer role, rarely, every now and then, you can do that for him, especially maybe against a lesser opponent. And even in high leverage, as we alluded to, this is not only a guy that posted right around a 3.4 ERA in this past year's postseason for the Mets, but prior to that, he has had a career ERA right around 2.2 across over 20 innings in Major League playoffs during his time with Houston Astros, among other teams. So Ryne Stanek comes to play when it matters most. He has moxie. He certainly has a lot of you-know-what's on the mound. He has those cojones for sure, and he's going to let you know exactly how he feels. If he feels that he's getting squeezed by the ump, he's going to let the ump know that he's getting squeezed. If he feels like the batter's being a schmuck for one reason or the other, he's going to let the batter Pat or no, hey, you're being a schmuck for one reason or the other. He's going to vocalize it. The hair's going to be free-flowing. He's going to have the goatee. But unlike the free-flowing Noah Syndergaard back in the day, this is a Ryne Stanek that will continue to let you know how you feel and not just throw it behind you and let that be that. He's going to talk smack. It isn't going to end until someone separates him. And that's the exact kind of playoff mentality, the exact kind of moxie that I want in this Mets bullpen. Let's see. My guy Pat in the chat, my favorite streamer is live. My favorite human is live. Thank you so much for being in here, Pat. We love to have you. For those that don't know Pat, he's everyone's favorite Yankee fan. Said I know a select few of you guys. But again, shout out to our guy Pat. We appreciate him chiming in as always here, folks. And we're going to await word here more on the news when it comes to Pete Alonso and Tim Hill. But let's actually do a brief pivot here just for a second before we further emphasize the impact that this has on Alonso. I definitely want to get into how this impacts the remaining moves for the Mets and this bullpen, because Ryne Stanek was pretty much a no-brainer. As we talked initially heading into the offseason, I told all you guys I want Alonso to return, obviously. I would like the Mets to bring back Jesse Winker, Jose Iglesias, Ryne Stanek. That's pretty much the group I'm absolutely comfortable and happy with. Everyone else, for the most part, I'm cool with JD Martinez leaving. Adam Ottavino, same applies. Phil Maton, after they said no to his option, that's fine too. Sayonara, see you later. You were great during the season for us, but unfortunately a little burned out in postseason, and you didn't live up to your previous postseason numbers as Ryne Stanek did when you both guys were stepping it up for the Astros just a year plus ago. I have been very satisfied with the reunions the Mets have made. I think the final missing piece on the reunion front is most certainly Jose Iglesias. I think that goes without saying as well. But folks, now let's get into, okay, by only spending $4 to $5 million on Ryne Stanek, what does this mean for the Mets' ability to go out and make other moves? Well, the good news about this is that this allows the Mets, without question, to still go out and land another reliever to their bullpen. Specifically, the Mets still like and feel comfortable in going after Tim Hill. As we alluded to, everybody, from Pat Ragazzo on the beat for the Mets, who did a great job in his latest article over the past day or two on Tim Hill, highly important for you guys to check it out. The Mets have continued interest in Tim Hill, and this is important because per Tim Healy of Newsday over the past month, the Mets initially showed interest in him then, preliminary interest, but now the market's really starting to move, especially after Stanek has signed with the Mets, and Hill is another one-year candidate, maybe with a second-year option. He's coming off of a tremendous 2024 campaign. After being acquired from the White Sox, the Yankees over 30 outings, posted just over a 2-year array there with the Yankees, and posted just over a 1-year array across 10 playoff outings, everybody. Tim Hill showed his ability to dominate in the Bronx and high-leverage situations all the way leading up to the dance on the biggest stage of all and the biggest market of all. That is exactly why the Mets have plenty of interest in bringing in Tim Hill. And the beauty about Tim Hill is that he would be a true lefty specialist for you, so that way you don't need to defer to AJ Mentor for all key lefty bat situations. You can defer to AJ as being more of that true setup guy, the way he's supposed to be, regardless on if he's facing lefties or righties. Whereas Tim Hill can really be more of your crafty specialist against lefties, as a guy only sits at, 89 miles to 90 miles per hour on the fastball. It doesn't matter that he throws absolute meatballs, because he has a tunneling fastball that's so deceptive because of the fact that he's a side-arming lefty at 6'4" with great extension. So that puppy rises big time, very deceptive. It reminds me of one of the Rogers brothers. If it's not, I think it's Tyler, because even though Tyler throws righty, I'm pretty sure he's like a submariner, whereas Taylor is just a lefty, and that's that. They're both so much fun to watch. Love the Roger brothers. But Tim Hill, who really looked fantastic in a big market like New York with the Yankees, now could rekindle that relationship with Desi Drewskull, the Yankees assistant pitching coach that they, of course, have hired this past offseason, coming over from the Yankees organization to play in that same role here with the Mets. As I asked Carlos Mendoza himself there at Amazing Day a couple of days ago, he's excited about bringing in Desi Drewskull and rekindling that relationship with Clay Holmes as well, to work on him further to build him as a starter. Same thing with Frankie Montas, and now what could be here with Tim Hill, but the Mets will have themselves some competition. The Yankees would like a reunion, the Dodgers, because they're the biggest schmucks of all, because God forbid that they didn't have their hands on one good player in the free agent market, they have to be involved as well. So it's not a slam dunk that the Mets will land someone like Tim Hill, but it's absolutely a realistic option for them to still consider if it can happen. Tim Hill is a Yankee buddy. Keep his name out your mouth. I'd say the same about Juan Soto, Pat, but unfortunately that isn't reality. Thank you so much for the donation, though, Pat. I love you so much. And when Tim Hill, breaking news, signs with the Mets with a first-year, one-year deal with a second-year option, brother, we will have you on for the live stream. We'll try to make that happen. All jokes aside, though, everybody, Tim Hill, I think he is definitely a feasible option for this Mets bullpen still. I don't think anything has wavered on that front. If anything, the only thing that this has written off for the Mets, and I think what we were hoping that they could maybe do, is bring in a former Yankee who's won it all, who was also with the Mets as their closer a couple years ago, with Edwin Diaz going down with injury, and that was none other than our guy in David Robertson. I would love a D-Rob reunion just as much as each and every one of you guys, but I will say that if D-Rob is not going to land with the Mets, then I just hope he doesn't land with a rival team in the NL East or anything like that. But in the case of former Yankees turned Mets, bring in Tim Hill. Like I said, I think he makes way too much sense as a next option for this team. So then your Mets bullpen, everybody, would be as follows if you could bring in a guy like Tim Hill. Just take a look at this, folks. Listen up and watch with me. Okay. Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, Daniel Nunez, Reed Garrett, Jose Budo, Ryne Stanek, Tim Hill, and then, depending on the size of your bullpen, you could dictate one of Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, or Paul Blackburn as really a starter turn reliever being utilized as a multi-aid reliever there. The Mets will have a plethora of options then. They will have the right amount of depth there, while also having some in-house options, including guys like Tyler Zuber, Sean Reed-Foley, among others, that as long as they are comfortable and will stay the year there to begin at least at AAA, they will get their opportunities as well, with injuries inevitably happening every single year to every team's bullpen. We have seen the entire Mets bullpen be decimated with injuries in years past, so wouldn't be shocking if something similar happened again at any point. You have to make sure you have the right depth for that, and bringing in guys like Tim Hill after already just signing Ryne Stanek today is the best way to move forward in making that happening, everybody. And again, it doesn't for certain need to be a guy like Tim Hill. It absolutely could be just a different option out there that's more of a lefty specialist, more of a soft tossing one that kind of balances out between himself there and AJ Minter. If Brooks Raley was fully healthy and back from his reconstructive Tommy John surgery, I would say go all out of your way to bring back Brooks Raley. I still want Raley back, even if he can't impact you until halfway mark of the season. I think Raley's such a good lefty reliever. He was nails for the Mets in 2023 when everyone else sucked and not named David Robertson for the most part in that bullpen. But folks, Tim Hill, Ryne Stanek is here. Tim Hill feels like that next piece that very well could still happen. Let me know your continued thoughts on him in the comments down below, because Hill's arsenal, if I didn't mention that already, everybody, let me just pull it up right here. And these numbers are courtesy of Baseball Savant. Sinker, four-seam slider. Sinker there sits right around 88, 89 miles per hour. Four-seam right around 90, 91. And the slider right around 82, 83 there. So Tim Hill, the sidearm, really crafty southpaw. I would love him in this Mets bullpen. Now, folks, Azulay won't be ready either until, like, I think, halfway mark of the season or so. But yes, pardon me, everybody. Azulay, who the Mets acquired, signed to a 2-year deal, who probably won't impact them much at all this year in their bullpen, if I'm being honest. Coming over from the Chicago Cubs, yeah, he has upside. He can throw absolute gas, too. Like I said, the Mets have plenty of options there for minor leagues up. Bringing in Stanek was great. Bringing in Tim Hill would just make it that much better, in my humble opinion. But I am awaiting word here to see if we're going to have an update on the Polar Bear in just a second, according to Andy Martino. Let's see if he has it out yet. Just give me 1 second. He's going to write about shortly. I'm not going to wait on Andy because I think it's going to be common knowledge what's going to come out. And if it's different, then we will touch on that in a further video or live stream later on today. But he said on how this impacts things for Pete Alonso, and the obvious impact that this has by impacting things with Pete Alonso is that by not going after David Robertson and by going after a guy that's going to cost you at least $5 to $8+ million less, you are going to have more flexibility to make a Pete Alonso reunion happen. And the Mets are stubborn with their line in the sand. They don't want to spend more than they feel like they absolutely have to for a guy like Alonso. The Mets have a level of confidence in their in-house options too, whether you guys like that or not. But because of the fact that the Mets have a level of confidence in their in-house options, or to seek someone via trade like a Ryan Mountcastle, like a Spencer Torkelson to a lesser degree that we touched on and over the past couple days' content, check that out in case you guys haven't already, is absolutely a world where Alonso may not return to the Mets, but Listen, Steve Cohen has rekindled that relationship, at least those talks, as of yesterday, reportedly, through John Heyman of the post that we touched on in a late night video yesterday for good reason. The Mets want Alonso back. Alonso wants to return, and now it really feels that we're going to find ourselves oh so close to making that a reality again. I will be surprised if we do not have a Pete Alonso conclusion by the time that we have reached the end of this week. And yes, I know this may come as a surprise to some of you, but I absolutely think that's a further reality that given the fact of how the markets are continuing to pick up, given that Steve Cohen was as outspoken as he was, as brutally honest as he was there at Amazing Fan Fest, where I was there in attendance and heard it with my very own ears, I can tell you that he wants Alonso back. Obviously, he's fed up with what has been an exhausting negotiation process. And for him to already be back in the deep end and back in the thick of things with Scott Boras and Alonso tells you how much the Mets do have a commitment to bring Alonso back. They just want to get it over with. And for Alonso, how much does it matter to just get back home, at least for the next year at minimum, and go from there with Juan Soto batting in front of you, being a part of the deepest lineup you've ever been a part of in Queens, and for a chance to go out and make history greater than what you did in 2024. You got that sliver of a taste. I'm sure that was very exciting and certainly adrenaline pumping, but I know you want your bag, Pete, but you're not going to get it long-term from anyone this offseason. So you might as well come back home, settle your chances here, at least with one more year, and if you ball out, you opt out, okay, great. Then we either bring you back or we go after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or someone else. And if you don't opt out, then the Mets can still have the luxury of either A, trading Alonso if they really want to, shifting him to DH and still going all in on Vladdy, or if Vladdy really proves himself as a third base option this year, that really could impact the future and how the Mets view things with Vladdy and also Vientos, and shifting to Vientos to first and or DH, or rotating things. Either way, even if the Mets have Alonso beyond the 2025 season, it doesn't really hinder their ability to go after one of those top guys that I just alluded to, especially in Vladdy a year from now. But how things currently are impacted by his market is telling, by the Mets not spending too big here on the bullpen. It's a greater likelihood of an Alonso reunion. I'm sure we're going to hear that pretty much verbatim right now from Andy Martino himself. And I'm just going to refresh to make sure I didn't miss anything here, because like I said, I know that he said he's going to come out with a piece sooner rather than later. I also did want to show to each and every one of you guys, again, the current structure of this Mets bullpen, because there actually is one reliever that I forgot to mention to each and every one of you. One, if not two, that we're going to get into. Well, one of them is Huascar Braziban. Shame on me. I really liked Huascar Braziban up until he kind of arrived with the Mets last year. I know Brazo struggled greatly after he arrived with the Mets, but I think Braziban in this Mets lab could actually be one of our better relievers in 2025. The guy's stuff is absolutely nasty. He's a flame-throwing dynamo that can be paired with a guy like Ryne Stanek, and I certainly like the upside there. But hold on, let me pull up this graphic for each and every one of you. Just give me 1 second, folks. Oh, there we go. Andy Martino just posted the article. There you go. How the Mets and Pete Alonso might pivot back to another. How they might, more like how they are. It's just, they've already started. It's already begun. Stop it. Come on, Andy. Either way, here's a graphic that you guys see. Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, Ryne Stanek, Danil Nunez, Reed Garrett, Jose Budo, Huascar Braziban, Sean Reed-Foley, and there's some names that are missing there that we're going to highlight here in a second. Let me just move away Pete's graphic for a hot minute. Let's put back Stanek there to put him back in the mix, everybody. But this is, who am I missing here? Okay, so I had Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, Danil Nunez, Reed Garrett, Jose Budo, Ryne Stanek. Okay, so I didn't miss on any of them. So 2, 4, 6, 8. That's our 8 as of now. If you bring in Tim Hill, it likely boxes out Sean Reed-Foley or Huascar Braziban, whoever looks worse there in spring training. And then you move forward with your bullpen like that to begin the year. That's what I think you do. The Mets are just one more move away. They are one crafty one-year deal, maybe with a second-year option away, even if it isn't Tim Hill. I'm fine with it being a different lefty option, but Hill, I think, makes a lot of sense for them, especially based on what he did this past year in a big market like what he did there with the Yankees. I love Stanek too, Waste. I do. I think he's a perfect flame-throwing option back in this Mets bullpen, everybody. But, folks, we do have some new news to get into that I'm going to relay from each and every one of you, and this has to do with the latest piece from S&Y's Eddie Martino. So let's read in and let's listen up. Pardon all this stutter state. It's because I like just got out of a nap and just went to doing this right away. So a little thrown off. You know when you guys are kind of in a daze or when you're slightly in that sleep state still and you're trying to really reel back in? That's essentially what happened because I woke up in a shock to see the Stanek news. I'm like, okay, we got to go talk about this right away. All right, guys, let's see here. Nearly 2 weeks ago, the Mets, yada, yada, yada. Okay. In order to sign Alonso now, the Mets would have to make the difficult decision to increase payroll and competitive imbalance tax penalties, far beyond what they had planned. No one had described a state of play more accurately and concisely than owner Steve Cohen at the Amazing Day Fan Fest. And he said, and I quote, I will never say no. We know that on his ability to return. There's always a possibility, but the reality is we're moving forward and we continue to bring in players. As we continue to bring in players, the reality is that it becomes a harder fit to fit Pete Alonso and what we're trying to do, obviously, with the expensive group of players that we already have, and that is where we are at. Roughly 2 weeks ago, Alonso turned down the Mets and what would have paid him more than $70 million, including deferred payments, and the Mets interpreted that as a sign Alonso would sign elsewhere. Again, this is a public negotiation, everybody, so color me shocked that we have seen things change since 48 to 72 hours ago when Cohen made his public remarks there at Amazing Day. It's all a public negotiation tactic. If the Mets didn't want Alonso back, they wouldn't be wasting their breath with him. The same way that if Alonso didn't want to return, he wouldn't be doing things the way that he's been doing the market right now. Things have just been stubborn one way or the other. Said Pete is desperate to come back to New York. Color me shocked. You know, that feels like a foregone conclusion as well. And we're going to further touch on the Alonso saga today and a Bleacher Report segment that I'll be live right around 4 p.m. Eastern. It'll be piggybacking off of John Heyman. Should John Heyman go right around 3 p.m. John and I, we have daily slots throughout the week there. NBR, I'm Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern sharp for MLBY topics. So make sure you guys are chiming into that if you guys weren't planning on it already. We'll talk on Alonso. We'll talk more on Ryne Stanek and everything else happening across Major League Baseball, including Tommy Kahnle getting close to a deal now with the Detroit Tigers, which is a very nice move for them, their bullpen, and for AJ Hinch. But now, guys, let's get into this one. As we see here, the team pivoted. As we know, they signed Winker, they signed Minter, that we know, and that took the team's projected payroll into the low $300 million, according to league sources. Add that to the standard in-season and trade deadline budgeting of $10 to $15+ million, and the Mets are already at $310 to $320 million, and that is without Alonso and the utility infielder they are seeking. And that utility infielder will more than likely be Jose Iglesias, calling that now. The Mets, however, brought in Ryne Stanek now, folks, so let's see what this means going forward. They had been talking to more expensive relievers like Kenley Jansen, too. The Stanek sign could keep a bit of a wiggle room to spend on Alonso. The Stanek signing more likely than not signals that the Mets are now happy with their bullpen. I mean, I think there's still a Tim Hill move away. I think you can never have enough lefty options, but I won't cry. I think if you give a guy like Jesus Cabrera an opportunity to compete, or Danny Young still on the lesser end and more low leverage, I don't hate it. It's just not my personal preference, but that's just me personally. Kenley Jansen is not a guy I love the idea of the Mets bringing in. I really like actually the Mets staying in-house with Stanek and his upside versus an aging Kenley Jansen who, while he has plenty of playoff experience, he's been here, he's done that. I don't know how much I'd like Kenley, even if he's more utilized in that setup role or just in other situations where you want a high leverage arm. I have a level of reservations with Kenley, especially during his little stint with the Atlanta Braves where we were absolutely mocking him big time there because the Mets were rocking him among others. But when we look at Alonso, though, there's definitely still an opening to make this happen. And the only reason that we're having this conversation 2 weeks after the pivot is that Alonso is not yet advanced last week between Alonso's camp and Toronto, league sources said. But a potential stumbling block there could have been deferred money based on Toronto's heavily deferred agreement with Anthony Santander already. As we've written before, according to Andy Martino, but the Mets' stance on Alonso as a player and a person has remained consistent. They like him, and we have wanted him back all along. Now that they have pivoted, bringing Alonso back at a similar 3-year deal with opt-outs to one he rejected would push them into an uncomfortable payroll territory, perhaps 330 to 340 million range. That is a big decision, and it won't happen today or likely this week. I don't know. I think things could. I really think we could at least hear some progress on this by the week's end because things are fluent, things change fast, and as Andy alludes to that he doesn't think it'll happen this week. Again, things can happen in a snap of a finger. I will be surprised if Pete Alonso is not inked a contract or has at least not gotten very close to, say, the 1 yard line by the time we've reached mid-February and pitchers and catchers are officially reporting. It just doesn't feel like it's going to drag on much longer than that. I could be wrong, obviously, but that's just my humble opinion. But to bring Alonso back, it goes without saying, makes endless sense for this Mets team. He's a surefire, more guaranteed fit over trading for Ryan Mountcastle, over trading for a Spencer Torkelson. While those guys have respective upside, Pete Alonso has the highest upside of all. What he can immediately give you, even on the down end, from what we saw in 2024, would still be better production than you could argue than what you get in Spencer Torkelson, and probably what you'd still get there in Ryan Mountcastle, even though I think there is a fair argument with Mountcastle. While the home runs have lessened over the past couple of years, he still has hit a good amount of doubles. His contact hitting has stayed strong in the 270 average range, and he can hit for all fields. So I think Mountcastle is a guy that really wouldn't be terrible as an alternative replacement for Alonso, but still, it's an Alonso replacement. You don't want to replace a guy after bringing Juan Soto to try to pair him with another 40 home run hitter. And the Mets bring back Alonso the way that I firmly anticipate them to do exactly that, then right away they will find themselves in a position where, bam, you have Mark Vientos, who is a guaranteed 30-plus home run bat in 2025, as long as he's healthy and doesn't have a massive drop-off. Francisco Alvarez, when healthy, is a guaranteed 20 to 30 home run hitter. We know this. You bring in WardyNYM, who can give you 20 home runs, but I could see that being less because maybe his playing time fluctuates with the plantar fasciitis, something that he's going to have to deal with all year long, which concerns me just because it seems that this is something that's greater, that he's going to have to deal with nagging for a while unless he gets a further repair on. I'm not entirely sure, as I know he's already had a procedure done there with it, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, when you look at the home run production, Francisco Lindor is going to give you at least 30, another 100 RBI season with hopefully 30 stolen bags, right? Juan Soto is going to give you 35 to 40 plus home runs, more than likely. You're going to get Starling Marte and Jesse Winker in a platoon role there, hopefully giving you 20 to 25 home runs, if not a significant amount more there, and that DH position collectively. You look at all the pieces the Mets have in 2025, and they easily have one of the deepest lineups in all the National League just on the power implementation alone if you bring back Alonso. If you don't bring back Alonso, you have a lot more question marks as to at least how that will be perceived heading into the season. Whether you go for an external target that we allude to, someone in-house that we've talked about as well, by shifting Vientos and by giving Beatty or other guys the keys at the hot corner. I see the pros and cons to it all, but there's nothing a greater pro, in my opinion, and the opinions of many, than to simply have Pete Alonso back and to have your lineup in no particular order, right? Francisco Lindor, WardyNYM, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos, Jesse Winker or Starling Marte, Francisco Alvarez, and then you go on from there, right? I mean, whether you're going to have McNeil in the lineup or whoever's at second base, and then you're going to probably have your 9-hitter maybe being Jose Siri or Tyrone Taylor. That's a really deep lineup, guys. Even with Alonso not playing his best baseball, that is absolutely baseball that I'm willing to sign up for. I think that's baseball that a lot of fans would sign up for. So where have we gotten in the negotiation process with Alonso? We have reached the obvious. The Mets could have spent more on a Kenley Jansen type reliever for their bullpen. They're likely not doing that now after bringing in Ryne Stanek back on a 1-year deal between $4 to $5 million. I'd say that they're probably still opportunistic and maybe acquiring a guy like Tim Hill, because I think he makes a level of sense for him, but maybe Tim Hill will return to the Yankees or go to a team like the Dodgers, because who doesn't want to be with the LA Dodgers right now, obviously. Among other things, the Mets are really close to rounding out their offense. They're really close to rounding out their offseason. There's just a couple moves left. Bring Alonso back or have his replacement ready. Bring back Jose Iglesias for the vibes, for the utility man, because they want another veteran infielder. Maybe bring in one more reliever, but it doesn't need to happen the way that it felt like it needed to up until this point. And if you can continue to be opportunistic on the starting pitching front, try to land Jack Flaherty, short-term high AV with opt-outs. Nick Pivetta only if Pete Alonso goes elsewhere. That way the QO picks offset then if you bring in a guy like Pivetta, because you'd have to give up QO picks for him. But it makes more sense if Alonso did sign elsewhere. Otherwise, I say really don't do it. At least I don't imagine that they would. Someone else via trade that we haven't highlighted as much, maybe like a Michael Cain, but he's a rental, so it's a little bit harder to pull off. There are avenues the Mets can go down, but needless to say, while they still have more moves to make this offseason, they're really getting closer to rounding this thing out. There isn't a lot of major things that need to happen. Biggest one of all, without question, is Alonso. Everything else is more I'm kind of like what they're feeling, on what the market's showing them, and how opportunistic are they going to be. So Mets fans, that is what I'm going to leave you with for our live show. I want to thank you all so much for chiming in live on a replay. It really does mean a lot. We broke down the latest on the Mets, bringing back Ryne Stanek and pairing that with potentially going after a guy like Tim Hill still, and bringing back Pete Alonso, as a reunion feels a bit more greater than it was 48 hours ago or so when Steve Cohen had his remarks then versus now being back and the Pete Alonso market now. Thank you guys again. Be on the lookout in case we are live for content later on this evening, sometime later on today, barring changes, or with a pre-recorded video. At minimum, this is what we're coming out with today, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below on it all, and before I get out of here, let me make sure that I did not miss any comments of my own. I don't believe that I did. Love you guys. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.